Welcome to the FiveStack, my friends. 5 of the biggest stories of the day. Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone, for stopping in to spend some time with us this afternoon. We'll go through the 5 most important stories democracy lovers on both sides of the border need to be aware of. You're not getting that information from mainstream media. You're not getting that information because mainstream media is afraid to talk about the things we're going to talk about today. And we've got a kind of an interesting lineup. If you watched my weekend roundup with Lev Parnas, former Trump fixer, Giuliani fixer, you know that trouble is afoot at the Circle K, the Democratic Circle K, and it all feeds back into the same loop, which is fascism is here, the police state is here, thought crimes are here, and now the Trump regime is trying to martyr one racist alt-right podcaster so that they can come after you. Welcome to the FiveStack. That is Zev. Where do you want to start today, big fella?
Well, let's start with the breaking news, which is still the story of the Charlie Kirk assassination. And a lot of controversy around the 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. He's a third-year electrical apprenticeship student from a small suburban community of Washington, Utah, who was arrested and is the key suspect in the crime of killing Charlie Kirk. Robinson is being held without bail at Utah County Jail on charges including aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, and obstruction of justice, with a special housing unit placement pending mental health evaluation. The suspect is not cooperating with authorities, but investigators say they haven't covered disturbing details about his radicalization through gaming culture, according to the governor, Spencer Cox, which describes as the governor describes as a deep, dark internet, Reddit culture, and these other dark places on the internet.
Yeah.
We still don't know very much about his motive. We really don't. There's a lot of speculation online, and many of you have read it. There is some new evidence today, according to Kash Patel, that they did find forensic evidence linking the shooter or alleged shooter to the casings and a screwdriver that they said what they found on the roof of the building. So that's where we are in the investigation. Many people online are calling this Tyler Robinson thing a patsy, that he's not really anything to do with the actual murder. I don't know if that's in any way true.
Yeah, they're calling him Tyler Harvey Oswald. Yeah. Yeah.
It's very well. What do you think? I mean, there's a lot going on in this investigation. It's impossible to find your way through the various explanations as to what he might have done this for or why he did this.
Let me preface what I think by saying something that everybody knows. Trump, Patel, Bondi, Bongino, Blanche, the DOJ are all fucking pathological liars. They're all pathological liars. We'll come back to that in a second because it matters in the big scheme of things. So when you talk about forensic evidence that Kash Patel has uncovered, that forensic evidence, according to Kash Patel's interview with Fox and Friends this morning, was fascinating. He's like, we discovered a manifesto. It was burned by the FBI. So we're going through it. But forensically, we know why he did it. Then you've got Governor Cox of Utah going, hey, this kid was radicalized gaming on Discord. And he's like got some really crazy far right views, which they're trying to frame as far left views. And let's leave left and right out of it for a second. We'll come back because the left is being targeted, centrists are being targeted, anti-Trumpers are being targeted. And that's really the goal, is to paint everybody that doesn't like Donald Trump as the left, or the reason why Charlie Kirk is being killed, the reason why Charlie Kirk is being martyred, and the reason why Charlie Kirk is being monetized, to be totally fucking honest with you. And so if you kind of start at that level of, okay, they're all pathological liars, every single piece of evidence Kash Patel and the Trump regime said they have about this gentleman's ideology is bullshit. It's all a fucking lie. And, I have seen the argument trying to frame the left through the murder of Charlie Kirk morph over the past 5 days. It's been 124 hours since the gentleman was shot, 126 hours since Charlie Kirk was shot and killed. It went from, it was a trans Liberation Army member, to he had trans-friendly views, to he lived with a trans guy, to now the Dinesh D'Souza explanation and the Carrie Lake explanation is, he was radicalized at trade school because higher education's bad. Don't send your kids to college because that's what happens. They'll end up shooting guys like Charlie fucking Kirk. So the morphing of the fucking narrative is one thing. But generally speaking, if you have any kind of, ability to think critically, you understand just the facts today. And the facts are that an online radicalized groiper, ultra MAGA, is said to have killed Charlie Kirk because he hated Charlie Kirk. If you understand anything about the groiper community and Nick Fuentes, and by the way, I've got a piece going up about how many times Nick Fuentes has called his groiper army and the America First absolute fucking groiper lunatics to attack, to take guns to hang, to destroy Charlie Kirk. And this gentleman that ended up allegedly killing Charlie Kirk, now not working with investigators, but investigators specifically through the lens and the funnel of what the FBI, the Kash Patel FBI, is telling you. Investigators are now working with his trans friends to get all the information about why, including a trans roommate, to get all the information about why this gentleman killed Charlie Kirk. The rugging is on. It's here.
Yeah.
We don't know anything. Like, we know nothing about the motivation behind the killing of Charlie Kirk other than the narratives that are being sent to you. And the narratives that are being sent to you, fed to you algorithmically, are hyper custom, because they've got data points on you and me and everybody else, 5,000 to 6,000 data points, where they'll go, we can change this guy's mind, or we can tell this person that the guy that killed Charlie Kirk was a trans liberation army guy or a leftist or an anti-Trumper, and we got to take out all the Trumpers. And then if you watched today, J.D. Vance, the fucking vice president of the United States, along with Pee Wee German, Stephen Miller, the most fucking hated incel extremist on the Nazi on the fucking planet. Not, if you watch their fucking, like, their opening salvo, they framed the left for the murder of Charlie Kirk and are still online doing it. This is the fucking vice president of the United States.
This is what they're going to do.
Yes.
They're going to stay on this track for as long as they can. They are determined to make this a left-leaning liberal, even if it turns out to be a card-carrying member of the groypers, as you point out. Look, it's amazing to me how little information they're going on. They don't have many of the surveillance footage that you'd normally expect. They haven't tracked down all these other angles, which are so important. You know, like, why is it only just this one guy? There's allegations about this other guy carrying a handgun. There's people taking down cameras on location. There's all these weird hand signals. There's all these, they admittedly conspiratorial kind of ideas. But why are they not investigating those or responding to those? Instead, they're ginning up what seems to be who knows, it would be fake, but it's hard to prove, a conspiracy amongst these supposed transsexual community of Utah and that are supposedly friends with this guy. I mean, it's so weirdly loose. We've not heard from anybody who's come forward and spoken about this. We've had no one say, "Hey, I'm a member of the community, and this is my trans friend." None of that. I'm not getting any of that.
The only co-signing of any relationship that Tyler Robinson had came from a high school friend of his who came out and did a video, which has since been literally scraped from the internet. Who's like, "Hey, listen, the only way I can describe this guy is one of those crazy, Reddit groiper dudes."
Yeah.
Like, he was full on into Reddit. He was full on into the community. And now you're starting to see the Utah governor, and I give him a little bit of credit, even though he's like, yeah, we're talking to his trans roommate. Because what happens is, and what's happening is every single headline I've seen from adjacent or MAGA adjacent or MAGA funded mainstream media outlets is the sexual preference of the people that he hung out with, the identity of the people he hung out with, to frame him and frame the trans community and frame progressives and frame liberals as the reason that this man killed a saintly Charlie Kirk. Keep in mind, a saintly Charlie Kirk that called for the whipping and shooting of migrants, a saintly Charlie Kirk that called George Floyd a scumbag and said, quote, "I'm glad he's dead." A saintly Charlie Kirk who said black women lack processing power enough to be successful on their own. A saintly Charlie Kirk who called for the fucking death penalty for Joe Biden and anybody around him that didn't agree with his white Christian nationalist bent. So when you consider all of those things, I think everybody in America that's not in on the grift, not in on trying to whitewash or sanewash Charlie Kirk's racist, violent, Christian nationalist rhetoric, which happened for 13 fucking years, including him saying, and I'm paraphrasing, not quoting, a few gun deaths, it's worth it for the Second Amendment, which ended up taking his life. I mean, you can't write a more poignant op. You can't imagine a more poignant op when it comes to the sainthood of Charlie Kirk, where NFL teams, Major League Baseball teams, because Donald Trump told Goodell and Manfred, you need to fucking treat Charlie Kirk like a saint. And some of these teams are, some of these owners are. This funeral that I saw today, Anna Paulina Luna, who's a psycho. She equated the importance of Charlie Kirk as a patriot for humanity with Martin Luther King, JFK, and RFK. That actually happened today.
I think that there's a lot to be said for the operation piece of this. I mean, clearly this is an op, which means, and we'll get to the funeral in a bit, but the op piece of it is, this can't be real. I mean, the odds of their perfect scenario showing up in the way that they say it's showing up is kind of minuscule. I mean, the chances are that this is a real trans shooter from a trans liberation army or connected to some terrorist cell that is trans are so tiny that it's so perfect to their script that it just looks ridiculous on the surface of it that it would be anything like that. But what I was pointing out on my narrative piece that I posted earlier on today is that there has been a real rift between Charlie Kirk and the Israeli or Jewish donors that were supporting him over the last few months. And this is a real thing that Candace Owen has been talking about as well, that there is he has been more and more opposed to Israel, more opposed to Netanyahu policies, I should say, over the last few months. And this is a guy who's in the history of the Turning Point movement has been very, very much aligned with Israel and a huge fan of Israel. But in the last few months, there's been a real sea change in how he's talked about Netanyahu, about his concern around Epstein, about his concern around the Epstein files, and also his concern about October 7th and what happened on that day. He has spoken more frankly and openly about what people are saying about October 7th than almost anybody else on the political spectrum. So, to define him as just what he said in those extreme moments in his past, I don't know if it's absolutely accurate. I think the last few months he was coming through some sort of awakening, if you would like. Maybe he's becoming woke, if you want. That, he himself said he was going through evolution where he's being much more, critical thinking was forming part of what he was doing. And in his assessment of Epstein, in the Epstein files, he is being quite vocal and pushed that more than anybody else. In fact, I think the whole reason you've got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Boebert and others on the side of releasing those files, on the side of signing onto their discharge petition, is because of Charlie Kirk. And there's something to be said for that kind of core conviction that he has. I mean, I will say that that's an interesting part of his character, whether you agree with what he says or not. He's surely very, his conviction is high in terms of what he says. But what's really interesting to me is Israel is the kind of, has a lot at stake here. If Charlie Kirk continues to be, if he was succeeding in amplifying the Epstein file story, if he had succeeded in making an even bigger story, then it could have challenged a lot of what Israel has tried to do over the last few decades in America and their control over, it seems, various aspects of our political life here. And the fact that he was causing some risk to that, and the fact that Bibi Netanyahu was so out front right after the assassination happened.
Yeah, where he put out, he's like, we didn't do it. I swear to God.
Yeah, but it's sort of like, just after it happened, he says prayers for Charlie Kirk, and then he was the first person to say, to give tribute to Charlie Kirk. This is a leader of a foreign country. Why is he inserting himself into a story like this? And the only answer to that is that he must be trying to navigate the perception of what Charlie Kirk was, because Charlie Kirk was an opponent to Bibi Netanyahu, but he's being presented as a real ally and hero of Israel, and it's his opposition to Bibi Netanyahu, which made me think, well, that's interesting. The same backers that are backing the fight to get rid of Thomas Massie, who's the representative pushing the release of the Epstein files, the same people who are fighting that, who are funding that pact in order to get rid of Massie, are the same people who funded Charlie Kirk's Turning Point movement at the beginning. And in the last few months, they've been threatening and have been taking away their support for him. He was down to his last donor, according to some people. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes that makes it look like he had really gotten upset with the Trump administration, that he had disagreed on the Epstein story so fundamentally that, he was continuing to pursue that. And that, I think you can't not look at that as a factor in his assassination.
Yeah, and that's, it's funny because I'm so focused on how the Trump regime is using Charlie Kirk, elevating Charlie Kirk as some kind of fucking saint who's never done anything wrong, and canonizing him, talking about statues, talking about naming streets after him. They're talking about blasphemy laws around Charlie Kirk. There's a black woman that got arrested at Texas Tech, and Greg Abbott celebrated it. The guy in the wheelchair, Greg Abbott, the guy at the end, fell off a ladder. He's like, oh. He's celebrating it, that you can't say anything bad about Charlie Kirk. And revisionist history being one thing, facts being another, that Charlie Kirk was an asshole. I mean, he was just a racist, Christian, white nationalist asshole. But let's leave, dude.
Yes, we can go into this. He said some terrible things along the way. There's no doubt about it. He has been a figure for the right-wing community and has pushed MAGA policies and strange white supremacist policies all along. But actually, when you listen to him recently in any event, as I was doing, he sounds completely reasonable. He doesn't sound like he's off on the.
Well, he sounds reasonable on certain, subjects. Like, for a guy like Charlie Kirk to openly question, Bibi Netanyahu's intentions, for a guy like Charlie Kirk to go against the machine that he helped build, when Donald Trump is actively working with Bibi Netanyahu for real estate, energy deals, et cetera, when, that creates obviously a major problem for Donald Trump. There are a bunch of indicators here that would dictate that Charlie Kirk was an increasing, liability, an increasing liability to Trump, an increasing liability to Netanyahu, and whatever the fuck little deal that those two pricks have worked out. And listen, you have to be able to separate Israelis from Netanyahu. You have to be able to separate Jews from the government of Netanyahu. You really do. And that's one of the things that Charlie Kirk actually did that I appreciated, is towards the end, in the last several months, he's openly started to ask questions about, genocide in Gaza. He openly started to ask questions about the intentions of a man, Bibi Netanyahu, who's supposed to be on trial, who is, he took October 7th, which was horrific. It was a genocidal attack of a Muslim terrorist regime on, peaceful Israelis at parties, in their homes, at festivals and concerts. These are war-weary people. He also, made a point of talking about, the plight in Gaza, which is a very human plight. It's got nothing to do with ideology. It's got everything to do. And he also understands the players deeply and probably knows some of these people, and we don't. So, when we talk about that theory or conspiracy theory, what you have to remember is that that 60 Minutes interview with the Mossad agent about 3-4 months ago, where a Mossad agent that was being interviewed said, "You only live in our reality. We do whatever the fuck we want," effectively. Now, that was an IDF agent that was cornered and had fealty to Netanyahu. So, 80% of Israelis do not want the end of the Netanyahu regime. Kind of like 80%. 70 to 80% of Americans want the end of the Trump regime in America, because they're giving every Israeli and every American a fucking terrible name. Like, the confidence in leadership or the positivity rating about both those countries is in the toilet because of those two men who are both dictatorial fascists. I watched an interview with Mandy Patinkin, Princess Bride, Amigo Montoya. You remember him? Guy with the 6 fingers? Yeah.
Awesome.
And
guy.
he
Awesome
was
actor.
screaming, begging, Jewish man, begging, saying, what we're doing to people is what was done to us. When will you fucking wake up?
Mhm.
Charlie Kirk echoed those sentiments towards the end of his life. So stopping short of saying, hey, we need to introduce this as a possible reason, and stopping short of a lack of any evidence, any motivation, any ideological tie when it comes to the shooter. And the only piece of evidence that Kash Patel said that they actually have, he said this today, we found a towel with the shooter's DNA on it, but they've not produced a gun. They have not produced a motive. They have not produced a reason. They have not produced a Discord slide. And if they do, I can tell you that within like a 1%, margin of error. And I can tell you this, it'll probably be a fucking work. It'll probably be made up. And so that leaves all of us to continually wonder, which that ambiguity plays in the favor of the Trump regime when people like us are going, who the fuck do we blame for killing Charlie Kirk? Because everybody only wants to know the motivation and the ideology of this young man, which is why you see Trump-aligned state regime media and Netanyahu-aligned state regime media and Russian-aligned state regime media saying, guy was a leftist.
Yeah.
The guy loved trannies.
Which is, is so predictable that it can't almost be true. So you've got a situation. The thing about the gun, by the way. So this guy was on the roof. He shot Charlie Kirk, and then within 45 seconds was off the roof. But he managed to take his weapon and disassemble it, obviously, because they disassembled it, put it in a bag. Then he climbs off the roof, then runs into the forest or wherever it was, the treed area next to it, and he supposedly takes the gun out of his
assembles
bag,
it,
and leaves it there on the ground wrapped in a
with
towel
all of his ammo.
With
all of his ammo that he had inscribed.
Yeah.
That he had etched those crazy, which was now been distracted by the Guardian, now been distracted by the Wall Street Journal, that he had etched all these anti-trans, pro-leftist things onto these bullets. I don't know. I don't know many killers that do things like, and you can take issue with the timeline. You can take issue with him reassembling, disassembling this bag. Malcolm Nance does a great job. But what you can really take issue with is the fact that he assembled this and left all the evidence underneath the towel in the forest not far from where he committed the crime. Yes.
Please find this evidence so you can then frame me for this thing. I mean, it seems so clear that that's the case. And now he's not cooperating, which of course can drag us out. They'll spend lots of time focusing on him. Maybe he'll get to trial, but the minute he's there in trial.
Do you want to know what I think?
What?
You want to know what I think about why he's not cooperating? Or that's the message that we're getting from people?
Yeah.
And keep in mind, I'm no Columbo. But if you want to frame a murderer, on somebody, you get him to shut the fuck up. You tell the rest of the world he's not cooperating, and then you talk to other people about his intentions, and then you manufacture an intention that you can lay on the man.
Or he knows he's going to get off, and he knows he's just doing it for other reasons, maybe. Maybe he's there to be this
maybe he didn't do it.
Maybe he didn't do it. He's a decoy. He's the patsy. Call it what you will. Maybe he's just the guy that they're looking to frame while the real killer might not even be there, or has escaped a long time ago. We just don't know enough. And I can't believe that they've just looked for this one guy, determined that it's one guy, and that's it, that there isn't a broader investigation into all these 3,000 people that were there.
Oh, dude,
there like 3,000 other people you'd want to interview?
And amazing that they're only going after one guy. And they're only going after one narrative.
Yeah.
And they're all predisposing everybody to that fucking narrative.
Yeah. It's
right?
so early to be doing
we
that.
don't have any of that information.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you consider the other options? Could it be that a foreign intelligence service assassinated Charlie Kirk? Could that be a possibility? I mean, surely it's a possibility. I don't know if it's the reason, but it surely could be. It could be that, any number of other motives would have been taking place, and other shooters could have been there to kill him, that it could have been an inside job. It could have been anything. So the fact that they've rushed to this conclusion that fits so neatly into Stephen Miller's view of the world makes you think that it's all a fake. It can't possibly be real.
This is, I'm smiling not because I'm happy, but I'm smiling because, like, as we talk about it, all those puzzle pieces are coming together, which is, how fucking odd is it that every time someone takes a shot, it's always the left. It's always trans people. It's the Trans Liberation Army. It's the gays. It's the progressives. And let me explain something to you. I've got a piece about this at deanblundell.substack.com. Encourage everybody to read it. Two pieces that are really important. MAGA is eating MAGA because Tyler Robinson was ultra MAGA. Mm-hmm. The perfect patsy, right? You can blame, you can defame, you can do all kinds of things with him. But the interesting piece that I want everybody to read is the playbook of how to frame the left for everything the right foments. And if you know anything about Donald Trump, if you know anything about the Trump regime, projection is one of the most important strategies. And not only to project, but to project in an avenue that benefits MAGA, that vilifies a certain community. And that community has always been 0.1% of the fucking population, because that's who their Christian lobby supporters fucking hate the most. The trans community, the progressive community, the LGBT community. And every headline on every state media outlet, from Fox News to GB News in the United States, is, by the way, he lived with a trans person.
Yeah. Whatever that
By the way,
yeah,
he had a very different ideology than his parents, and his parents are Trumpers, massive fucking MAGA Trumpers. By the way, just in case you didn't know this, the gentleman who shot Charlie Kirk, he had roommates. One of them might have been transitioning to, the sexual preference of your roommates is somehow playing into the intention of the individual.
Yeah, he's involved in a terrorist cell, a trans terror cell. We've never had trans terror cells. Suddenly this thing is a thing. It's like it's such nonsense.
Oh, by the way, and here's the thing, and GWB in the chat. Thank you, GWB. Really appreciate you being here. They've also framed, and this makes me laugh, actually. They framed him as someone who was empathetic to the trans/furry community.
Yeah.
Furries. And if you know anything about furries, one of the main fucking cudgels that GOP used in the previous inception of the Trump regime was about how they were trying to protect children from being forced into identifying as cats and taking a dump in a kitty litter box.
There's legislation about this, I think it's somewhere. Hey, listen, this is, it's gotten beyond sort of normalcy.
Reality?
Yeah, like we're sort of living in a simulation right now. It doesn't even feel like it's real. There is an interesting side note. I haven't run with this yet, but I should mention it here, that, Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk came from the same school of conservative MAGAism. It was from the Jewish-funded or the Israeli-funded, what's the name of the foundation? David Horowitz Foundation. And they obviously are funders of a lot of these MAGA characters, but they're also funders of Donald Trump. And it's interesting that the other person that sort of came up from the ranks at the same time as Candace and Charlie was Stephen Miller. So you've got these three guys that were groomed to be the next generation of MAGA leaders. And in the last few months, Charlie Kirk has been turning away, has been calling out truths about Israel and about Bibi Netanyahu that has certainly not made Stephen Miller happy. And Candace Owens is echoing some of those things that Charlie has been talking about. And so you've got this rift happening inside that organization. And you can see it being played out every
But do you believe
day.
a fucking word that Candace Owens says?
I do believe some things that she says. I know she's gone pretty bizarre on some occasions, but I've watched her show a couple of times. It's not irrational. In some ways, the whole Brigitte thing is ridiculous.
Like she said, Brigitte Macron was a man.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous
by the
line
French government.
Spend your time doing something else. Anyhow, there's better stories to cover. Like, what's the story there? But I do know that she was, like Charlie Kirk, part of this, identified as left, told us the other day, identified at a young age as potential future superstars in the MAGA universe and groomed from a young age to be that. And that over time, as Charlie found out, there's another side to this story. There are truths that they were not told, and that he refused to in his case. And I give him credit for this. I give him credit for not giving in. He actually knew his life was in danger. I think he knew his life was in danger, and he was going to still, because of his faith, give people the truth. And I think that's
same faith that told that mandated him to encourage conversations about how black women lack brain power.
You've got to look at Charlie Kirk's timeline as in an evolution. I don't.
I look at everything that dickhead has said, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, to hurt Americans, to hurt migrants, to hurt people of color, to hurt the trans community, to hurt the gay community. And you know what? You can talk about how this gentleman and how important he was, or maybe he had an evolutionary, moment in his life where he decided that, he was going to look at what Israel was doing, or he came into some information that really bothered him when it came to Netanyahu. And you can give him credit for that. But, much like the conversation about don't speak ill of the dead is a real big part of this. If that dead person, encouraged violence against people of color, incurred violence against academics, incurred violence against political violence against people, encouraged people to take a couple of lives because the Second Amendment's worth it at the end of the day. That always has to be part of the conversation, and nothing, I mean fucking nothing, that Charlie Kirk has decided to advocate after the fact erases any of that. And for us to feed into that narrative is just part of the MAGA playbook.
I don't think it's feeding into that narrative. I think it's important for us to admire what he did at the end there in terms of calling the Epstein files, and that took a lot of courage, regardless of what you think. He took a lot of courage to tackle his
let me ask
donors
you a question.
And to put his life on the line in order to do this, and to turn away from Donald Trump, and to turn away from Bibi Netanyahu, and demand that the Epstein files be released. And
but let me ask you a question.
We should honor that part of what he was talking about, and actually
we can include it in the conversation.
Epstein files.
We can include it in the conversation.
People do evolve, Dean. People evolve. Look at Lev Parnas, who went from being a guy that I used to, investigate as an investigative journalist. And couldn't believe some of the stuff that Lev Parnas, did in
now
his
you're
past.
podcasting with him
but now
all
I'm
the time.
podcasting with the guy, and he's evolved. Clearly, there's an evolution there that you can't disrespect, because it's an evolution that's clearly manifesting itself in action. And I think the same thing with Charlie Kirk. I mean, he didn't go completely woke, but he certainly at the end there, I think in his understanding of Israel and understanding of the Epstein files, he kept telling the truth and going against his funders and his donors were ditching him. He was losing everything for this, and he was still stuck to the truth. I mean, that is he
stuck to his truth. Like, let me just kind of, and I listen. I'll give you that. I'll give you that he went against the machine. But why do certain people go against the machine? Why did Charlie Kirk go against the machine when it came to Epstein, when it came to Israel, when it came to Netanyahu? And let
he
me
opened his mind to critical thinking, is what he said. Yes. Because what happened, he was raised from 18 years old into this MAGA movement as a disciple, right? Like, he was brainwashed into this thinking from an 18-year-old. And now he's 31, and he's beginning to see the world as it might really be. And I think he, by his own admission, started thinking critically about Israel and about what Israel was doing. But
not black people, not women.
He actually was not as, I don't want to speak too broadly about it, because I haven't listened to enough of his episodes other than the Israeli ones. But I think there's a lot there. Like, I've seen his interactions with gay people that have been very, very inclusive, actually, not actually anti-LGBTQ at all, that, welcome gay people into the conservative movement, that were not opposed to people who are gay. I thought that there was surprising interactions that were less horrific than we've been told they were.
Okay. Give him whatever credit you need to give him for any kind of thought process that changed over the course of his 13 years as the CEO of Turning Point USA, which made $400 million, by the way. $400 million in 13 years. It's a lot of fucking money. and give him credit for going against the machine that he was taking a bunch of money from
Built his
Israel.
empire.
Yeah. Give him credit for that. Give him credit for standing up for that. I go back to the Dan Bonginos of the world and the Kash Patels of this world when it comes to this conversation. There is a realization of every maggot that is in the Trump regime going on right now. Okay? That realization is, oh my God, Bibi Netanyahu's an asshole. That realization is, oh my God, maybe there is genocide in Gaza, right? That realization is also, oh my God, I've gaslit millions of people about the Epstein files and about Israel's intentions. And I've made millions doing it as an alt-right podcaster. And I've built an army of people. And so I would introduce that into that, new woke thought process that Charlie Kirk had when it came to Netanyahu, when it came to Israel, when it came to Epstein. Because Charlie Kirk was the pom-pom fucking shaking, release the Epstein files guy for a long time. And he watched his base like Trump watched his base abandon him when for one day, Charlie Kirk was like, yeah, I think it's time to move on. The reaction was so severe from the people that actually lined his pockets that he decided to go, okay, well, maybe we should look into it. I would like to introduce that.
I just, it could be that it was the reaction from his audience, but the money came from these donors, and the donors were telling him not to do it. And the donors were telling him that they were going to withdraw all this money. And those same donors are currently funding an effort to stop the release of the Epstein files by getting rid of Thomas Massey from his position as representative.
Both things can be true.
Both things can be true, but it sure is that interesting that they're aligned, and that they're also aligned with Donald Trump. That all those things, that those same funders, the Adelsons of the world, the Paul Singers of the world, the John Paulsons of the world, they all are supporters of Donald Trump. They're supporters of the effort to dispose of Thomas Massey, to change his, to not getting reelected, and they're also supporters of Turning Point up until Charlie Kirk started talking about Israel in a different way when they withdrew their support. And that is undeniable and just truthful, and that is a fact. That Venn diagram there, or that diagram is showing that those donors, the donor network is a lot of evidence, real hardcore factual evidence that there is an attempt to suppress these Epstein files that is very, very broad. And that because of Charlie Kirk's opining on the topic, we have got it to the point today where there's 217 votes for this discharge petition. Maybe there'll be 218 coming soon. If we can get there, it could be because of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, and listen, if that's the reason, and if in the end, we find out, and I'm stretching here, like Stretch Armstrong, remember those dolls? Yeah. I'm stretching here. If indeed Charlie Kirk's opposition to the non-releasing and and his anger over the Epstein files leads to the discharge petition getting let out, let's call it the Charlie Kirk discharge petition. What a great legacy for a man whose past is filled with hate.
Yeah.
If indeed we find out that Charlie Kirk was part and party to understanding that Netanyahu is a terrible fucking human being and a fascist who committed genocide against the people in Gaza. If indeed we find those things out, let's call that, the Charlie Kirk compact when it comes to understanding what goes on. If indeed, I will give him and the memory of that gentleman the credit for standing up for whatever it was that led to the release of the Epstein files, whatever it was that uncovered, Israel's involvement in any kind of fucking shenanigans where it comes to foreign interference in the United States and abroad. I will give him credit for that. I don't, and here's the catch, is that your body of work Everything you say and everything you do is your resume. You and I know that both. I know that intimately because of my past and how my life has been framed by the media and all that other stuff. I get that. But I'll give that man credit. But again, I go back to this all the time, is that Charlie Kirk and what Charlie Kirk stood for, what he did on 3,500 campuses around the United States of America to young men and young minds, telling them that white people have front of line access. Black people are only with you because you give them this special opportunity, or slots, he called them. Black women don't, can't process, proper equations to be successful in life. Or like all of those things matter when it
They
came
matter.
to the environment that ended his life, and to exclude him from that because, he started asking questions about Netanyahu's intentions is ridiculous to me.
I'm not saying excuse that. I don't think you can excuse any of those things that he said earlier on. And I don't think you can excuse any of the media in corroborating these narratives that are distasteful and appalling and supporting MAGA as a real
Hateful,
regime. I
racist.
mean,
Yeah.
they're disgusting. There's no way of looking at this regime as anything else. But this has been a well-funded, well-organized effort by largely foreign interests, but also domestic ones, to really psychologically tamper with American brains and brainwash a lot of Americans into the super cult, as you were talking about. I mean, this is not just happening by accident. He could have been someone who was part of that cult as well, as identified at a very young age and groomed into a position. I'm not excusing anything he said. I'm just saying we have to look at his evolution towards the end and say, well, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm only saying it's really interesting because it frames the murder in a different way.
Yeah, yeah.
Could it
No, I get
be
that.
that he was
Yeah.
murdered for something else other than these left-right politics that we're being pushed into? It
You know,
could
you know what
be
leans
that he
you know
was
what leans into what
yeah.
you're saying? You know what leans into what you're saying? I don't know if you watched people are gonna get angry about this, but I don't care. I don't know if you watched Erica Kirk's 13.5 minute
Yeah,
bizarre
it did.
turning point press conference. I don't know if you saw her unhinged, perfectly lit and sounded open casket video. I don't know if you saw the subsequent request for everybody to join the army to go after evildoers. Subsequent, where it fit the perfect crime, the perfect grift. You hit people with grief, then you tell them that you're taking over, and then you vilify a certain group, then you ask for money. Erica Kirk this weekend on GoFundMe. Keep in mind, the Kirk family has generated $400 million out of Turning Point USA. They're worth between $15 and $20 million as a family. She made $4.3 million on GoFundMe this weekend. She made another $10 to $20 million and completely reoriented the entire Turning Point movement. And not once did anybody talk about Israel. Not once did anybody talk about Epstein. Every conversation pointed to the same fucking culprit, which is you, which is me, which are trans people, which is the left, which is anybody that doesn't identify with Donald Trump as a legitimate fucking president of the United States, and his movement as a legitimate movement to, quote, take back America or make America great again. And I watched that this weekend. I put out a post about it where I formulaically proved out that this is what cults do, right? And to your point, the death of Charlie Kirk, and I'm leaning into your conspiracy theory here, so enjoy it. The death of Charlie Kirk completely reoriented every conversation around the Epstein files. The death of Charlie Kirk completely reoriented the conversation around Bibi Netanyahu. The death of Charlie Kirk completely militarized the entire MAGAverse, from the Groypers to the low-level maggots, to create this new super cult. I had Lev Parnas on. He talked to people in the Trump admin today and yesterday. What's the goal? To deal with the fractures in MAGA that have been caused by Epstein, Russia, and Charlie Kirk's penchant for questioning Israel. All of those discussions have ended. All of that rhetoric is gone. So while I completely have to, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, you have to take into account what this gentleman stood for, not what he was trying to talk about now. To your point, you can lean into that conversation and go, who benefited and why? And it's painfully clear that this creates a solve or a buffer for all those fractions within MAGA to bring them all together into that super cult. And if you saw what happened in the UK this weekend, where that little fucking prick, Tommy Robinson, held an anti-immigration, say his name, Charlie Kirk rally where a couple 100,000 people showed up and Elon Musk appeared on the big screen and told everybody, they're coming to kill you unless you get them first. The time is now to fight. What a perfect fucking storm for Donald Trump.
It is. Well said. I got to say one other thing, because the reason I got to these, I just had a thought this weekend that this reminds me a lot of Lenin, of the death of Lenin. The Russian leader, not the musician. Who died in 1924, Vladimir Lenin did, and from a series of strokes. There was an assassination attempt years earlier. And he still lies in state today, in Red Square. And it's interesting that Lenin's demise, even though it was, horrific, and he certainly was martyred by the Russians, led to exactly what you're talking about: Stalin consolidating power and moving everyone to the right. And I know it sounds ludicrous to think of Charlie Kirk and Vladimir Lenin in the same breath, but there is something to be said there about the way these movements, about the way revolutions idolize and canonize their leaders and turn them into martyrs. And I think we're seeing some of that going on now with Charlie Kirk.
Well said. Well said. History is a great teacher. If you want to learn anything, you talk to the dead. You talk about the dead. Yeah. And what a great example. I've never considered that, but there's a reason why the corpse of a guy who's been dead for 101 years is still on display. It's a rallying cry. It's a battle cry. It's the same reason why, I was disgusted, not because I don't like Charlie Kirk or what he stood for, by this perfectly produced video that Erica Kirk put out, kissing Charlie Kirk's dead hands with a handful of bling, saying "I love you" with, dubbed in undertones of what is believed to be Charlie Kirk saying "I love you too," and fed to hundreds of millions of people this weekend. It is absolutely a playable example, to your point. The rallying cry, the battle cry, the sainthood, the martyrdom, which we're coming back to now as we started to kind of have that conversation before. That is for a couple of reasons. And I think one is to consolidate power. Two is to consolidate power among a fractured group, which has been fractured because of the Epstein files, because Donald Trump has not delivered on any one of his promises to end any single war, because he's abandoned Ukraine, because he's trying to confuse and frustrate every single one of the members of his base. But the one thing that a lot of those people, whether you're a groyper or not, had in common: Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA.
And I think we should use this as a rallying cry for the Epstein files. I'll just go back to that. I think
absolutely,
every single person should be calling their congressperson and saying, Charlie Kirk wanted us to release the Epstein files. We should do it to honor his memory. We should absolutely vote in favor of the discharge petition and get those files out, because those files, I believe, contain a lot of secrets that we really want to know about.
Totally agree. And
now that has been a one stack instead of a five stack today.
Yeah, the one stack was a lot of fun. If you can kind of break it down into 5 different stacks in the one stack. But yeah, that was good. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So everyone should check out deanblundell.substack.com, because that's where you get the best news in the morning. I don't know what time you wake up. I don't know how you do what you do, but every time I wake up, which is a little later than you, I get the best news in the morning from deanblundell.substack.com. Become a subscriber, become a paid subscriber. It's the best place to check out the news in the morning. At narrative.org, I've got a the story that I posted about Charlie Kirk. It goes through some of the key points that I found out about the funding around Charlie Kirk, and also you got video evidence there of his transition, and then also some interesting interactions with Megyn Kelly, another sort of former Fox News person who's become quite a big deal on YouTube. So check it out, read it, form your own opinions. And The Greatest Heist, I'm going to bring back that series. I stopped for a week because I just needed to see what was going on with Charlie Kirk. But the next part is coming out, and it's a goodie. So hopefully by tomorrow I'll have it out.
All right, buddy. Well, I can't wait. Greatest Heist series, one of the greatest context setters that you'll get when it comes to what's going on today. Always good to be with you all. Thank you so much for stopping by to join us on the FiveStack today, where we try to get to the most important stories. Story was a one stack. We had other things to talk about, but this is still pretty important because the long-reaching impact of the martyrdom of one Charlie Kirk. And it's happening here in Canada. It's not just in the United States. We had the Canada First chapter, which is the America First arm here in Canada, get shouted down the street as they tried to hold a white supremacist say his name party at Christie Pitts. The significance of that we'll talk about in my Substack, because that's where all of the racists who hated Jews went after Jews in Christie Pitts. Prior to World War III, which is here in Toronto, and or World War II, it was a big deal. It was very significant. And so we're trying to keep an eye on what's going on here in Canada because this is spilling over across other borders. The rallying cry around this gentleman. And a lot of things can be true at the same time. You can still have empathy for this man's children. You can have empathy for his family, but you can also call a spade, and that's what we try to do here. So we'll see you tomorrow on the FiveStack, 3:00. We will be back with my friend Zev Shalev. A wonderful day, everybody. And don't forget to subscribe to both of our channels, free or paid, doesn't matter. And more importantly, please share. Share this conversation with people if you found it important, if you learned something, if you got context you didn't have before, or if this affirmed the information you have. And I say this all the time, you're not crazy. They are. We're here to reaffirm those values and that perspective. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching the FiveStack. And we'll see you all tomorrow, everybody. Thanks for spending time with us.
Cheers, Dean.